Talking Sports Podcast, episode number 10, and I'm your host, Peter DiBiasi. Before we dive right into today's topic, which I'll tell you in about a moment, I just want to make sure you guys always click the subscribe button. We appreciate everybody that has subscribed to this channel. I appreciate all the love I have gotten so far. We have reached over 7,500 total views on this channel. I never thought we would ever reach that. We also have reached 145 subscribers, so hopefully by this video, end of this video, we will have reached 150 subscribers. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. A lot of people that watch videos have not subscribed, so please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like this video if you agree with me or disagree with me, and make sure you always follow our new Twitter account. Me and Rocco Trumpbour, our main people that are going to be running the Twitter account. We're putting out great content lately on the Twitter, great interactive content, polls, player rankings, anything that you would like on the Twitter. Make sure you comment down below, and we've been doing great for that, and that will be in the description. Also, it's called Talking Sports PD. That is Talking Sports PD, which is our Twitter handle. Okay, let's dive right into this video. Last time you saw the video, saw me, we were talking about the NBA playoff predictions. If you watched that video, you knew I said the LA Clippers would be defeating the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA championship. So let's see if that prediction comes true. Everybody knows that the playoffs and the season's coming back July 31st, ending around mid-October. But today we're keeping on the NBA topic, a little different. We're doing the most underrated and the most overrated NBA players of all time. I'm going to give you 5 underrated players, and then I'm going to give you 5 overrated players. I hope a lot of people disagree with me. That is more fun. And I know there's going to be some people from certain areas, certain friend groups that are going to disagree with me on some of these players. So let's kick this right off with my first underrated players. I'm going to give you 5 underrated players, and then we'll flip over to the more controversial topic, my 5 overrated players. First underrated player, that is Charles Barkley. He was an 11-time All-Star, 11-time All-NBA team. He won an MVP in the 1992-1993 season. And the thing that is so important about that year is that it was during the Michael Jordan's peak year. Everybody knows, if you watched The Last Dance and you followed Michael Jordan's career, they did win a championship in that season. The Chicago Bulls did, and Charles Barkley defeated Michael Jordan for the MVP. So he won an MVP over the greatest player of all time in his peak career. He averaged 22.1 points per game and 11 rebounds per game in his career. People really only talk about that him not winning a championship, but playing in such a peak year with a peak era with great players like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and then Michael Jordan, Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp, Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing. The list goes on. John Stockton, Karl Malone. The list goes on, and then future David Robinson. There's tons of players he played against. His team were never that good in Philly and in Houston. His best chance was with Houston, but as everybody knows, in the conference finals, they were knocked out by John Stockton and Karl Malone and the Utah Jazz, who went on to lose to Michael Jordan in the NBA championship. So Charles Barkley is my first underrated player. Move on to my second underrated player. That is Grant Hill. He's a 7-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA player, and won the Rookie of the Year in the 1994-1995 NBA season. Career average 16.7 points per game and 6 rebounds per game. Those stats do not jump off the board, but for his first 6 seasons, he averaged 21 points per game until his career was really altered by his ankle injuries. His career numbers were only 16.7 points per game, and not a lot of people talk about him because he was supposed to be the next Michael Jordan. The problem was he was injured. First 6 years of his career, he averaged 21 points per game. He's one of the best scorers in the NBA, but the problem was he was injured by ankles. He's like similar to other players that have been injured a lot in their career, like Penny Hardaway towards there, and then you have Derrick Rose, Brandon Roy, some other players that had careers cut short. Grant Hill did have a pretty long career for having so many injuries, but he was never the same after some of his injuries. So his peak years were his first 7 years. He averaged 21 points per game, and he still was able to make the Hall of Fame after having so many injuries. So people do not talk about how great Grant Hill was before all of his injuries. We're moving on to the next player, and that is Pau Gasol. 6-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champ, 4-time All-NBA, and 2001-2002 Rookie of the Year. Stats, he averaged 17 points per game in his career and 9.2 total rebounds per game. He was overlooked by so many big men in his era, like Kevin Garnett, Dwight Howard, Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki. He's similar to Charles Barkley, so played with so many great players. And he also played alongside Kobe Bryant, was the Scottie Pippen to Michael Jordan to the Pau Gasol to the Kobe Bryant that he was, helping Kobe Bryant win 2 more championships, increasing his level to 4 to 5. Pau Gasol is not talked about as one of the best big men of all time. They haven't put him in that category. I think he should be closer than people have him. Pau Gasol is my number 3 player as underrated. We're moving on to number 4. We're tracking back a little. We're going to Horace Grant, 1-time All-Star, 4-time NBA champ, and 4-time All-Defensive Team. Total points were 11.2 points per game and 8.1 total rebounds per game. Very much a key piece to the Bulls' first repeat as the 3rd best player on that team after Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, and played a very similar role as did Dennis Rodman did in the 2nd repeat for the Bulls. Also made the playoffs 9 times with Orlando and Chicago. Did not get enough credit, especially in the documentary, and he was not too happy about that for helping that Chicago Bulls win 3 championships. They missed him dearly after, obviously, Michael Jordan left and after Horace Grant left, but they really missed that interior presence. When Scottie Pippen was alone, they didn't have him. Bulls did end up losing to the Orlando Magic, who also had Penny Hardaway, a young Shaquille O'Neal, Nick Anderson, a couple other great players. That Magic team was really good. So Horace Grant was similar to Dennis Rodman, does not get enough credit. His numbers don't pop off the board, but he was more of a defensive player, making a 4-team all-defensive team. He also won 4 NBA championships. That's a lot. 3rd best player on a lot of the teams he won championships on. So people should give Horace Grant a little more chance. That 4th NBA championship with the Lakers was a little towards the end of his career, but the 3 championships were great. So Horace Grant should be on a lot of people's higher up on people's list. My 5th and final underrated player of all time, Joe Dumars. He was a 6-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champ, 3-time All-NBA, 5-time All-Defensive Team, and the 1988-1989 Finals MVP, which is one of the most underlooked Finals MVPs of all time. His career stats were 16.1 points per game and 4.5 assists. He doesn't get enough credit because he was on the bad boy Pistons with Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, Isaiah Thomas, that were really defensively. He was a great defensive player, really good, as he made 5-time all-defensive team. But he was also the main scorer on that team. He was a primary scorer. MJ was also quoted saying Dumars was the best defensive player. So he could score, play defense, did not get enough credit for being such a good player on that Pistons team, as Isaiah Thomas got way more credit than he actually should. I love Isaiah Thomas. I ranked him on my Twitter page. We did as number 5 point guard of all time, but I think Joe Dumars should get a lot more credit than he actually does. Also, in his first finals, when he won the Finals MVP in the 88-89 season, he averaged 27 points per game. That is Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James-esque numbers. That's like one of the best scores in a finals ever. Yet nobody talks about that Finals MVP over the Lakers when they swept the Lakers. He won 2 championships. He was the Finals MVP, and he averaged 27 points per game. The dude is an absolute machine. He should be on more people's list. I don't know why he's not. But Joe Dumars rounds out my underrated. A little recap of my 5 underrated players. And before I give you my recap, if you disagree with me and you think these players are not as good as I said or overrated, please drop a comment down. Say, Peter, you're wrong. I don't care. Say I'm wrong. Say Charles Barkley stinks. That's up to you. And please, if you agree with me, hit the like button. So my 5 underrated players were Charles Barkley, Grant Hill, Pau Gasol, Horace Grant, and Joe Dumars. Now, let's do a little to the overrated players. I'm going to give you 5 overrated players. I'm going to give a couple players that actually play today or end of their career or still playing today. My number 1 overrated player, Draymond Green. I am not a Draymond Green fan. I think he's one of the most overrated players of all time. I have him number 1. Basically means he averages 9 points per game and 7 rebounds per game. He's a worse Dennis Rodman. He's a worse Horace Grant. He's not even close to their level. Yes, he's a really good defender. Nobody's getting away from him defensive. But those championships are very tainted for him. Yes, he was a big key piece defensively, but when also playing with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant, you really didn't have to do much. You literally just play defense. 4th, maybe somebody's 5th scoring option when Harrison Barnes was on that team. You saw this past season as Kevin Durant went to Brooklyn, Klay Thompson was out for the whole year with torn ACL, and Curry was injured a little bit into the season, that he couldn't even lead his team to an 8 seed in the West. That's not really who he is. He's also one of the worst 3-point shooters I have ever seen. He has a career 31.9% field goal 3-point percentage, and he sits in the low 40s for total field goal percentage. Yes, I get it. People could be, well, Pete, that's not his thing. He's an offensive. Doesn't matter. He's just not that good of a player. You could see how he can't lead a team. I don't think Draymond Green is that good of a player. He had a 12 per this year. That's below average. Per is just player efficiency rating. He wasn't efficient this year. He's a 9 point per game scorer and a 7 rebounds per game. Those are a mid-tier average NBA player of all time, like every NBA player, not all time. He's not one of the best defenders. He should not be credited for all this. He was also, and I also just forget to mention some of the scores. Andre Iguodala, who was also a better scorer than him on that team. So you had Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Harrison Barnes when he played for the team, and Andre Iguodala, who were all better scorers than him on the team. So he was like the sixth best option on the team with no scoring ability, just a defensive. If he was on any other team, he'd basically be just a role player. That's what he is. He just was overlooked because of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant being on his team. My number 2 most overrated player of all time. People are not going to like that, especially some of my friends from the Boston area. That is Paul Pierce. Career 9.7 points per game score, average 5.6 rebounds per game. Pierce never made an All-NBA first team and only made All-NBA team 4 times throughout his 19-year NBA career. Very little success without KG and failed to make the playoffs 2 years in a row before Kevin Garnett was acquired from Minnesota. He's not nearly in the same class as some other Celtics legends as Larry Bird, Bob Cousy, Kevin McHale, Bill Russell, Kevin Garnett, and John Havlicek. He's also the guy that said he's better than Dwayne Wade, which is a very outrageous comment. Dwayne Wade's a top 3 shooting guard of all time, one of the greatest players of all time. Paul Pierce is not in that category. Paul Pierce, even though he was a great scorer, wasn't much of a winner, won 1 championship in his 19-year career. Only made All-NBA team first 1 time. People think he's such a great player. I thought he was a good player. I thought he was not a great player. I'm not saying like, he's overrated. That means he stinks. No, Paul Pierce was a really good NBA player. He's just not the legend that people make him out to be. He's also only made the All-NBA team 4 times. So Paul Pierce is my number 2 most overrated player. We're flipping over to another current player who currently plays in the NBA, plays for the Portland Trail Blazers. You might guess that's Carmelo Anthony. 23 points per game and 6.5 total rebounds per game. Probably the most one-dimensional player of all time. Score the ball, give up as many points as he did on the end. So basically, he scored 2 points, he'll give up 2 points on the other end. So he basically just kind of counted himself out. His defensive side of the ball has always been bad. He's never known for his defense, which has kind of hurt him throughout his career. He's also has never made an NBA Finals in his career and only made the playoffs 3 times out of the 7 seasons when he played for the Knicks and never reached the conference finals with the team after he was acquired from Denver for a huge package that included Chauncey Billups, Landry Fields, and a couple other players. He always needs the ball in his hands. He never really could. He needed the ball in his hands. He was never a playmaker without the ball. He couldn't. He always needed the ball. He's similar to Russell Westbrook. He always needed the ball in his hands, similar to James Harden. Can't really do anything else without the ball in his hands, which kind of ruined the flow of the offense for some teams. One of the most selfish players of all time and never developed into a winning player, as you can tell. He never won an NBA championship, never made an NBA Finals. He is a great scorer. That's what he's going to be known as, just a great scorer. Not a great player, not a great playmaker, had one of the best, smoothest jump shots, not a great defender, not a great team player, not a great winner, not any of those. As his career went on, less and less teams became interested after his failed stints in Oklahoma City and in Houston. Kind of came on and played a little well in Portland, averaged about 15 points per game, But he never became – just always a scorer. He needed the ball in his hands and can never do anything without the ball in his hands. My number 4th most overrated player of all time, that is Chris Webber. Averaged 20.7 points per game and 9.8 total rebounds, almost a double-double in his career. Similar to Carmelo, his stats pop off the board, but he never was a winning player, really similar to Carmelo Anthony, not the same style of play, but never became a really winning player. Only making the All-Star game 5 times and only making All-NBA team 5 times in his long 17-year career. Never ever won a championship or even reached the finals in his long 17-year career. Chris Webber, everybody knows him for the timeout in Michigan in the Final Four. But we're not talking about his college career. NBA career, a good player, not a great player, not the player that people make him out to be, a scorer, never really was a winner. Yes, he helped Golden State kind of get out of the gutter, and Sacramento, he kind of brought up a franchise that was kind of dead for so many years, but he never turned that team into a championship caliber team. They were a playoff team, 4 or 5 seed team in the West, but never elevated them to a championship team as he never won a championship or even reached an NBA Finals. Very similar to Carmelo Anthony. So those are both really similar players, not in the style of play or the scoring ability, but in their winning and kind of selfish play on the basketball court. My final and fifth most overrated NBA player of all time, and that is Vince Carter. I love Vince Carter, but he's overrated. He averaged 16.7 points per game and 4.3 total rebounds. That's a mid-level NBA player. That is not a Hall of Famer, which we don't know if he will be now, but people think he is. That is not a superstar. That's barely an all-star. Vince Carter's just your good player, maybe your third or fourth option. He's not going to be a superstar. Should not be your superstar, should not be considered a superstar. Unlike the last two players that were mentioned, these stats do not pop off the board, like I just said. Known for his great athletic ability and dunking, which created noise around his game. That made a lot of people believe he was a great player, but mostly overall in his career, he was just an average NBA player. Yes, he won the dunk contest. He's one of the greatest, probably the second greatest dunker of all time behind Michael Jordan, or maybe Dominic Wilkins. You could debate that any way you want. So he's one of the greatest dunkers of all time, but he wasn't a great player. Wasn't a great defensive player, only averaged a little over 15 points per game. Was a good player, never became a great player. In his long 22-year career, he only made the All-Star game 8 times out of a 22-year career. That's not a Hall of Famer. And only made All-NBA team 2 times. So you played 22 years, and you only made the All-NBA team twice, which is good, but not where people rank him in his class. I'm not saying Vince Carter is a bad NBA player. I'm not saying any of these 5 players I just said are bad NBA players. They're not trash players. They're just overhyped for what the media, ESPN, Fox Sports, all those networks say they are. He had a long and nice career, but he's not the star that everyone made him out to be. It was similar to all these players. I know this topic might get some controversy. You might love these players. I like some of these players. I liked watching Carmelo Anthony play for the Knicks. Vince Carter was a highlight reel to watch. Some of these, Chris Webber, I never got to see him play because I was too young, but he was a good NBA player if you watch the highlights. Nothing wrong with these players. They're just overrated players. I'm going to give you my 5. Just if you missed that, these are my 5 overrated players. You have Draymond Green, Paul Pierce, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Webber, and Vince Carter. If you agree with me, hit the like button. If you disagree with me, still hit the like button. But if you also disagree with me, say you disagree with me in the comments. Say, Peter, Paul Pierce, one of the greatest players of all time. What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Say that. I love when people debate me. I think I'm right. You might think you're right. It's everything. So this was a fun video. Most overrated, most underrated players. I would like to do this for more sports, maybe some baseball, some NFL. And I'm excited to hear about the NBA coming back July 31st. Obviously, my Bulls are not in there because we did not qualify, because we didn't have a good year. But I'm going to be excited to watch that. So if you liked anything I said in this video, hit the like button. Make sure you always comment. Make sure you always subscribe to the Talking Sports podcast. We are so thrilled that everybody watches our videos so much. Make sure you follow the Twitter, Talking Sports PD. Me and Rocco and Trumpbour are doing a great job. He's my media guy. He does all the highlights, edits the videos, does the Twitter, all that stuff. He's a great guy. Just to remember, everybody stay safe. Coronavirus is a scary thing, so make sure everybody stay safe. This was the most overrated and the most underrated players of all time. And this was the Talking Sports podcast. And I'm your host, Peter DiBiasi. Until next time, thank you.